some of these messages that I'm communicating aren't new. We have a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol in Northern Ireland. The consequences are all too obvious to us. We only have to walk our streets of an evening at a weekend and we see the consequences of excess alcohol consumption, particularly the consequences that have been highlighted in the media in terms of the real impacts on our young people. The very distressing stories that we've had of parents sharing the loss that they have experienced as a result of their son or daughter consuming excess alcohol, or indeed been exposed to the consequences of somebody else drinking excess alcohol and the consequences.
So what do we do? What's the answer? How do we fix this? If this is a problem that keeps on coming back every year, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. In fact, in many cases, it just seems to be getting worse and more shocking.
Well, we are doing things about it. We do have a government policy which is signed off by the executive in terms of addressing alcohol in Northern Ireland. We're taking a range of steps on other government departments in terms of DSD, which is looking at sales and licensing and promotions of alcohol. We put legislation through the Assembly. We have been pushing and very significantly in terms of both balancing legislation and putting requirements on those who sell alcohol, and indeed working with industry to positively promote responsible sales of alcohol to individuals, working with the on-sale trade and the off-sale trade in terms of ensuring that staff providing alcohol are actually trained to identify individuals, ask for ID, challenge people who may be underage, or identify when people have had too much alcohol. But again, the one thing I've highlighted in my report, which I think we need to actively consider, is a minimum unit price for alcohol. We know, again, back to research, looking at the research evidence, looking at countries which have introduced minimum unit price of alcohol, such as Canada, we know it works. We know that there's a direct correlation between price of alcohol and consumption. And what we're talking about is changing the culture where we regard alcohol as an everyday commodity. It's not. It's a psychoactive drug which causes real harm, and it's not a commodity that should be sold like bread or milk.
In some cases, though, it's worse. In fact, you know, it's glamorised. Our young people are seeing it and thinking, they're watching programmes like Geordie Shore, all the rest of it. And the fact that we are in this part of the world, there's a culture here, very much. You don't need to go very far before you mention that you're from this part of the world. Oh, well, you're Irish, you must like a drink. And that has been instilled in young people from a very, very young age.
It is, and I think that it's not just the levels of consumption of alcohol, it's about how we consume the alcohol. And binge drinking is a particular problem in Northern Ireland. You know, we don't have the approach to alcohol that's in some European countries in terms of consuming it only with meals. We tend to store up the amount of alcohol we consume and then consume it all at one time. And there is really strong evidence that that sort of binge drinking causes real and lasting harm. I think one of the things that we're looking at a UK level, the 4 UK Chief Medical Officers will be introducing new guidance in relation to alcohol consumption and safe levels of alcohol consumption. Because I think to the public sometimes it's confusing.
Extremely confusing. I haven't got a clue. I'll be honest with you. When it comes to, they talk about the point system, levels, how much you're meant to drink. People talk in glasses and pints. They don't talk in these points, and people have no idea what they're consuming.
Yeah, and I think people do, and I think the Select Committee hearing back in 2011 made that point. It said, look, the evidence we get, but we're not certain that the public can translate and relate to the advice that you're providing into something.
And that's 3 years ago, and it's still that system.
Yes, and indeed there is work which we, again, I anticipate that we'll publish very shortly in terms of how we communicate messages. Firstly, a major review, international review, which we've commissioned as the 4 UK CMOs, of the evidence around safe levels of alcohol. Is there, first question, is there a safe level of alcohol consumption? The evidence would increasingly suggest that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. That's not to say we should ban alcohol consumption, because again we need to get a message across which informs people about how they can minimise the harm of alcohol. In the past there was lots of myths. Oh, alcohol is good for you. A pint of a so-called black substance is good for your health. No, it's not. We had again evidence, so-called, of the protective effect, the cardioprotective effect of alcohol. A glass of red wine is good for your heart. Now, things have changed. We know that the cardioprotective effect of alcohol, in terms of is it good for your heart, the evidence there is weak. as we have made significant improvements in the health of the population, which we have, and I highlighted in my annual report, in terms of reducing the number of people with heart disease, because we are being successful in some areas, any additional benefit from a glass of red wine is likely to be extremely small and probably likely to be offset by the increased risks of consuming alcohol. So I think what we need to do is ensure that the guidance that we have out there is actually up to date with international evidence and the changing international evidence around alcohol. We need to perhaps look at other countries, Canada again, Australia, who are more definitive in terms of saying there is no safe level of alcohol. Now, I think we also then need to think, well, people are still going to drink, so we need to give people advice which allows them to reduce the level of harm and make informed choices in a way that people can understand. And I agree with you, the guidance is at times complicated and confusing.
And it's still that issue too that I mentioned earlier on about it's glamorised to young children. They still think it is very cool to be off your face. You just need to look at the net nominations craze that was going around, which was insane and hard for parents to watch.
Is it cool?
I would argue that they think it is. They absolutely think it is.
No, I'm not certain that I think that the issue is one of is it cool or is it not cool. I think
it's certainly normal to them.
Well, I think all children. I was a child once. I can remember it. I think I have young teenagers and I have younger children. Childhood is about pushing the boundaries. Developing adulthood is testing the boundaries. It is about sometimes rebelling against the social norms, and young people do that. And it's about finding your place and finding your space in society.
So are they being allowed to push those boundaries further than ever before?
I think that rightly, I think those boundaries were always tested and were always pushed. I think, however, what we're seeing is the mix of that and social media and the internet and behaviours then getting put online, and those behaviours very quickly becoming a cycle or a craze or something that people will become party of and sign into and take part in. I think it's different in terms of individuals in the past, and now can very quickly be recruited into a particular craze or the latest thing to be doing. I don't think young people think it's cool to be drunk, to be sick on the footpath, to be lying in the gutter, to bang your head, to have no memory about what happened the night before, to have no memory in terms of who you may have had sex with or whether you may have had unprotected sex, to get into a fight, to injure someone yourself or someone else. That's not cool. That's extremely unsettling, distressing and disturbing. And I don't know of any young person that's been in that sort of situation and come out the other side with significant consequences that thinks that was a cool thing to do.
And why do they go back and do it again? They go back out the next weekend, and I was at the Odyssey the night that everyone has been talking about. And it really was tragic. I remember being young, and I remember there were people who were drinking underage, certainly. But it was the level, and the worst part was I spoke to police officers that night and they said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, obviously this is a surreal situation." And they said, "This is every weekend, it's like this."
Well, I think that is the point, wake up. This is a problem. It has been a problem for a significant number of years. We have an unhealthy attitude to alcohol, and what we can't get into is a situation where it's somebody else's problem to fix. We've talked and concentrated here on young people. It's not only young people who are drinking to excess. It's as a population we're drinking to excess. Alcohol is 67% more affordable than it was in 1980.
So minimum pricing, that is the answer, you feel?
There is no one answer. There's no magic bullet. We didn't minimum unit pricing tomorrow, despite the research evidence. We have to do our own research to see if that's a proportionate approach. I think the evidence is strong. I'd be very interested in seeing the research. If the research suggests it would achieve an impact, reduce consumption of alcohol, particularly in young people, then we should be introducing it if that's what the evidence and research suggests, and we'll know very shortly research that we're doing on a north-south basis. But what I would say is that it is a societal problem. It's not young people's problem, it's not older people's problem, it's not the responsibility of health, it's the responsibility of all of us. We have personal responsibilities in terms of what we consume, how we consume it, how much alcohol we consume. We have personal responsibilities as parents. I have a responsibility to my children in terms of how I consume alcohol, how I behave around alcohol, what I say and do about alcohol, and I need to make sure that I'm not sending out conflicting messages between what I do and what I'm telling someone else to do as well. We need to break the social collusion that there is around alcohol, the difference between what we say and then how we behave. We send very confusing, conflicting messages to young people. We say, don't drink alcohol, don't drink to excess. And what do parents do? They drink to alcohol to excess, and then they get embarrassed when they have to go to the bottle bank and unload a crate load of wine or beer bottles, often to the extent that some may actually require a bottle bank in their own back garden. So,
do you think parents then they have to take more responsibility here?
We all need to take more responsibility, and again, there's a responsibility in all of us. There's a responsibility in all of us across government to create the circumstances where we can ensure that people are taking healthy choices around alcohol. That's about education, about raising awareness. It's looking at where there's a need for legislation. We have introduced legislation, I've said, in terms of controlling sales and promotions of low-price alcohol. Drink all you like for as long as you like until you fall over. The Department of Social Development has introduced licensing laws and tightened licensing laws and introduced bans around those sorts of promotions. Those are good things. Similarly, working with the Department of Social Development, we again are looking at minimum unit pricing as an important vehicle. We're working with industry in terms of ensuring, as I've said, that those selling alcohol, working with people who are consuming alcohol, are better trained in challenging people in relation to underage sales, and indeed identifying when people have had too much to drink, so that we're not getting into those tragic situations where people come to harm as a result of excess alcohol consumption. But then there's what we do. There's what we, as members of society, that we have personal responsibility for making choices that impact on our own health.